Pecorino is due to the fact that in the Abruzzo region, for, let me say, for only white wine produced was Trebbiano. Where all the producers, both before and after, concentrated their efforts. And this is the reason why we called it the wine of the future, because this is the bet made by our producers. This is a sort of a wine in progress because there is no tradition, there is no history, so there was no foundation from where to start. So therefore, every country, every company started from scratch. In the first place, well, planting it, and secondly, bottling it, giving it a new interpretation because there was no reference, no historic reference, no production related reference. But all this, well, especially at the end of the 90s and in the decades, following decades, many attempts have been made. And in fact, with regard to the same labels we have today, well, different styles followed because producers started analyzing and understanding their own way, their own interpretation. And yes, in fact, new interpretations, because this is also a very versatile vine variety. And in fact, one of the answers I gave myself is the following one. Since there is no history, as you said, there is no tradition, well, the future of Pecorino is still to be built. And this is the reason why we developed this title, The Wine of the Future. And this is the reason why the consortium introduced a new DOC, DOC Abruzzo, and in order to give a sort of regulatory framework to the Pecorino, not only to Pecorino actually, but Pecorino has been one of the vine variety around which this denomination has been built. And so the Abruzzo system, together with the wine growers, are currently working in order to develop a paradigm for this wine based on scientific grounds and also promoting it because this is a very young wine and needs to be promoted, to be known by the public at large. And it is known that up until the 50s, as a matter of fact, Pecorino was, well, let me say, almost abandoned. And in fact, this is a rather productive vine variety, but and actually it's not productive and it's also early and therefore it's also risky because when it blossoms, some climate adverse events may compromise the harvest. So therefore, there is now this beautiful return, and the Abruzzo vine growers reinvesting in it. And we know that in Italy, we do not have so many white vine varieties which are totally local, like this one. So becoming a flagship for the territory. So we worked very well on Verdicchio and also on Trebbiano, which is the local competitor to Pecorino. And let me say that, as we know, there is a lot of Trebbiano, and let me say there are some peaks that have are still unparalleled. But to some extent, this is still a rustic type. And Pecorino has concentrated now the efforts of Abruzzo wine growers. And the territory is rather very special as well. So this region has been declared to be the green region of Europe, and this is very easily explained because it's not so large, but we have three natural parks and 38 protected areas. So therefore, almost 70% of the region is under protection. So therefore, we were talking about this with Davide before, and if you wanted to go from one place to the other place or opposite, you have to sort of circumnavigate the area because you cannot cross the protected areas. So let me say that this title of being the green region of Europe definitely has encouraged a type of interpretation, especially on the side of the young vine growers who, let me say, at least with regard to these six types of wines, they managed to really give a very special interpretation, exuberant interpretation, and this is another characteristic of this bottled pecorino, which has developed which develops a very important alcohol percentage. And therefore, this is a very important, let me say, horse that needs to be kept at reins, and it is a full-bodied wine with a very high concentration of sugar, and so therefore if this is balanced with acidity, this can last, the wine can last long, and this is the reason why we call it also the white wine of the future. So the name of this vine variety, and it's always an interesting thing to ask questions about the names. And with regard to Pecorino, we have actually there are different attributions here, but what we can refer to, but here, please, Davide, maybe you can expand on this. So the name is related to transhumance, when the sheep were brought from the hills next to Aquila to the Apulia region. And this was a very long journey in September. And after grazing during the summer months, the sheep were brought to Apulia. And during transhumance, which followed specific pathways, so the sheep crossed the vineyards. And what happened? So the sheep were eating the grapes on their pathway. But of course, they were also very, so these are very witty animals, and they were picking the right grapes, this variety specifically. And because why? Because this is very sweet, and Trebbiano normally harvests later on. So therefore, the sheep were preferring this type of variety, and they were eating the grapes, and they were eating the grapes on the pathways, as I said. And the shepherd, in order to compensate and to, let me say, refund the owner of the vineyard, was offering pecorino cheese, and this was the only thing the shepherds could barter in a certain way, and for this reason we have this name, pecorino. So in association with the transhumans, and also the shape of the um, of the bunch of grapes, which is very similar very similar to the head of the sheep. Well, this is a vine variety which grows on the hills up to 700 meters of altitude. And well, actually, let me say, even at 800 meters of altitude, there are some vine growers who have tried this altitude. And as a matter of fact, the highest vineyard is at 830 meters of altitude at Castel di Sandro. Yes, and in fact, and we also have another company, another vine grower close to the Navelli area, growing grapes above 750 meters of altitude. So also for this reason, we call it the pecorino of the future, because we have to understand which is the most suitable area. So well, of course, this is this is grown on the hills, and yes, and also the fact that it can grow at such high altitudes, well, this makes it a very precious vine variety. And in fact, this is a trend that is also encouraged by climate change. So growing vine varieties higher and higher in order to oppose to the changing climate. So therefore, again, this the title we have given it seems to be even more credible. So I would like to ask our sommeliers to serve all the wines, and then we will taste them and make comparisons. And meanwhile, I would like to tell you something about the first. Well, I believe you noticed it. And here, below the indicazione geografica tipica, so typical geographic indication, the sentence is wrong. This maybe refers to Montepulciano. So, but this does not relate to pecorino. So this is Secolo Nono, the name of the wine company. So therefore, and this is the second year for this producer to produce pecorino, and we will see how the interpretation changes. So I will taste it with you, together with you. Well, it could depend on the glass, but what I perceive here at the palate, because the nose, even if it is definitely fruity and a little bit spicy, what I perceive on the palate is a full-bodied essence. And this is the first wine in the morning, so maybe I'm reacting in this way. But in any case, I perceive this full bodied essence, mango fruits with flower notes, and also a trace of chamomile, but nothing related to the nose, and also a vegetal note. And the mouth is tactile, so therefore there's a very nice wake, tannic, maybe not, but tactile, which I like a lot. Can you tell us something about the producer? Okay, yes, of course. Here we are talking about the countryside of Pescara. And the name of the company is Tenuta Secolo Nono, and it is located in an area in the Abruzzo region, very close to Gran Sasso Maiella, and this third region, the first two adjacent, and there is the Pescara River. And this company is very close to these two areas, and therefore there is always wind in this area. And this is a prerogative of the entire Abruzzo region, because agriculture is very much promoted on the hills. And in this case, even more, because this is a windy region, and this producer is rather young. This company is started 20 years ago, approximately, maybe less. And and it is known for another product, and and for a small production, and this is called Moscatello. This is a white Moscato variety, and research has been made by this producer also for this vine variety, and so and they are bottling it both dry and sweet. But unlike Passito wines, this is very special, and therefore, over the years, as a matter of fact, oh, they developed pecorino. So therefore, they started producing pecorino in addition to Moscatello. What is interesting about this producer is the fact that the vineyards are located approximately 400 meters of altitude, almost on terraces, and yes, very interesting, very beautiful. The year, this is 2020. So we are going to taste 2020, and I don't think this has been written on the technical cards. Then Cantina Tollo, this is 2019, and the last two wines, 2018. Okay. Let's start with the second one, which features a completely different profile. So I decided the order of the wines. So if you have to blame anybody, blame me. So here, these wines are very different from one another, and at the beginning. I thought of putting the 2019 earlier in the order, but then I thought that this was not really orthodox, and maybe you will understand the reason why. So, this second wine, um, this this is the Arabona producer, Mia Natura, and the name is already evocative, I would say. And personally, I and also the nose is very evocative, a Creole maceration with ambrosia, so with the and this was done on purpose, and also the color is very eloquent and brilliant, and very much fascinating. And the mouth is different as compared to the nose, compared to the first wine where the nose was more modest. Here instead we have a greater opening, and actually, sorry, here there is much concentration, and therefore this is a personal perception. I don't believe very much in organoleptic descriptions because, of course, the way we taste wines is different from one another. So, but in any case, I recognize a completely different hand, which is much concentrated, and it is concentrating on the extraction. So here, again, this is the Pescara region, the Pescara Valley, but on the other side, on the south part, and therefore closer to the seaside. And just before Chieti, the region is Manopello. Manopello is a small village outside Chieti. And one of the key characteristics about this producer is the fact that they, since the very beginning, they focused on organic growing. And this has been one of the first companies to be certified as organic production and organic growing. Also because the owner, who comes from another region of Abruzzo, invested in this area because he wanted to establish a 100% organic company. And the wines, well, we frequently say that the wines reflect the vine grower, and here this is the case. And in fact, they produce three lines. They've got three lines, and this reflects the most the company's philosophy. So, what you were saying about the nose, this is very characteristic indeed, also for the other white wines that they produce. Oh, good, very good. Okay, let's continue with the Colle Civetta. Completing the wines dated 2020. And in this case, we have spices, special spices. We have salt, we have minerals, we have and also something relating to the sea, and also the spices with these aromatic herbs, a very impacting scent. And I asked myself what kind of vinification this could have. And in here we have something interesting. So after after traditional vinification, 6 months on noble lees, 3 months in bottles. So I thought there was a maceration, there was a wood involved. I thought something like this, also because I tasted all of them blind, but therefore this was a personal perception I had. But actually, well, I tasted it 1 week ago, and then I perceive also green pepper, Sichuan pepper, typical of Oriental cuisine, mixing these notes of pepper with the glutamate. But we should not think that there is oxidation, but in any case, there is a special profile with these aromatic notes. And this wine comes from an area where the land is rich in minerals and lime and organic substances, and therefore the nose is exactly this. Depends on this description. Let's taste it. Yes, at the palate, it is very sapid, very tasty. The acidity is almost overwhelming, and my perception is that out of the three at the palate, this is the youngest. The company is Placetti. And where are we? Well, this is again in the province of Pescara, and here, compared to the previous wines we tasted, or at least there is a stronger terroir here. This is highly marked here because, as you said, the soil is very mineral, with the high concentration of lime, and the landscape is very special. This is at 500 meters of altitude on a terrace, and this is a terrace overlooking the Pescara Valley. The Gran Sasso mountain is behind, and in the front there is the Maiella and the sea. This is a very enchanting landscape. And the company is located in the province of Chieti, Francavilla al Mare. But the owner, let me say, anticipated the idea of climate change, and he, as a matter of fact, anticipated this project a lot, and he invested removing the vineyards on the sea, close to the sea, and he planted the vine varieties here, close to Chieti and Pescara, and another one close to L'Aquila. It's so much interesting to see how they the soil actually reflects, because as you said, we do not have a very special vinifications here. So the wine is produced in steel, on noble lees with the selected yeast. But in any case, the soil is very much reflected in the wine. And knowing the company, I also know the Montepulciano of the same area with this same savory characteristic, savory note. And As a matter of fact, there is another bet on this wine because this wine initially was left decanting for a longer time, and instead now they have decided to present it during the same year. So the bottles, oh, well, actually, the bottles, well, this is a question. So we are talking about a couple of thousands of bottles. This is one of the first companies investing on Pecorino. The company has two lines, this one and a selection. And then it also features another line, and in addition to Pecorino, they produce couple of 100,000 of bottles. Of this selection, only a few thousands. Okay, so let's proceed with the 2019 wine. And also in this case, this is very delicate. Um, this could be a 2020 wine, more than the other ones. But, I wanted to stick to the rules, and therefore I wanted to stick to the rule of the chronological order. Okay, so here these are all 100% Pecorino wines. And this is important because in order to consider the IGT and DOC denominations, we could privilege other wines, but here we have selected 100% Pecorino wines. So maybe an interesting element to know is the fact that this is a rather new variety, and many investments are being made. And in fact, many producers are now producing rather a lot. This type of wine is growing. Up until a couple of years ago, this was just 1.2 million bottles, and now we have 2 million bottles. And therefore, out of 250 companies, 80% produce Pecorino wine. So therefore, we can say that also the wine manual will be changed in the future, because this variety is growing well. And therefore, I believe that this is going to be promoted even further in the future. And yes, you're totally right. And also, when the denomination was introduced, then the number of hectares was not at all the number of hectares we do now have. And therefore, and the quantity and the investments made by the companies allow us to ensure 100% Pecorino production. And so here, this is wood. This is present, and in fact, 50% of the bottled wine is fermented in oak. In oak, actually, and actually, this wine supports this type of this essence, wood essence, and the nose. Well, this is very delicate, and we have this rather moderately fume retrolfactory note, which is reminiscent of the oak. and rather dry, very expressive at the palate, and slightly less at the nose. I would like to taste it maybe in 1 year because this is a very interesting wine. It makes me curious. So this is the Cantina Tollo. Yes. All right. This is a wine that needs to be understood because every company is giving Pecorino different interpretation. This specifically is a cooperative, and you know that in Abruzzo region, in the Abruzzo region, cooperations and cooperatives are very much frequent, representing 75% of wine production in the region. And fortunately, the cooperation has grown over time and at the company level, definitely, and also in terms of quality of the product. And in fact, the reason why we are presenting this wine today is due to the fact that we wanted to provide you with evidence of the cooperation of the Abruzzo producers, wine producers, because it's very easy to associate the idea of cooperation of low-profile wines, but instead, in this case, this is one of the largest wineries. And this selection of Pecorino wine is the result of a selection of vine growers. And these are projects, very important projects, starting from the agronomic part and ending up with vinification. And this wine specifically is one of the 3 Pecorino wines produced by the Cantina Tollo. And this Cantina Tollo is experimenting on this type of Pecorino. And in the first years in the bottle, I'm talking about the end of the 90s, beginning of the 2000s, it has been bottled in various ways. Because there was this exuberant characteristic, and therefore this is the reason why this was put into oak barrels and to sort of tame it. And progressively then, oak barrels were replaced by steel ones. But many companies still are trying and experimenting again, mixing oak with steel. And also cement, yes, because the cement was this has always been the traditional barrel for us, the container for us, the traditional one, the cement containers. Yes, in fact, this is something that I didn't say before, also for the Marche region, and also when I was talking with Davide, also in the Marche region, so the southern part of the Marche region, very close to the seaside. Yes, and in fact, the area is very close to Ascoli Piceno, very close to the Abruzzo region again. And so therefore, So therefore, in the Abruzzo region, we have a Pecorino, 100% Pecorino white wine. And in the Ascoli region, we have half-half. So therefore, but it's growing. And so the level of complexity is increasing. And therefore, it is important to note the characteristics of the territory. We have different climates, even if we are still talking about the hills. Yes, the hills, you're right. But let me say that so the denominations are regional, right? And so therefore, in this case, with regard to the Pecorino wine, this is being produced from the north to the south of our region. And also very close to the seaside, because we have vineyards close to the sea and also on the hills. And therefore, these denominations are helpful because in this way we can tell you the the differences of the different areas. So here we have Valentino Di Campri, the president of the consortium, and everybody is working so that these varieties are translated into different labels. Well, this is a very promising work. So let's proceed with the last but one wine, Cantina Rapino 2018. And here, so definitely, here there is maceration when I was tasting it blind. No, I was wrong. But in any case, the nose is very expressive. Many mature fruits, yellow and ancient flowers, lemon, and the mouth. The mouth is, I wrote, relaxing, lightweight, delicate of yellow flowers and medlars, and very interesting. And so let's taste it. Oh, this wine is not as exuberant and full-bodied as the wines we have tasted earlier on, but I like it because it's very relaxing, very delicate, a type of wine you can really enjoy. And also there's a salivation, and this means that this wine is savory and therefore not too much, so therefore very appreciable. And so, Cantina Rapino. Yes, okay. So we tasted the Pecorino by Cantina Tollo. Here we have Cantina Rapino in the province of Rieti. This is very close to the sea, on a hill that overlooks the sea, and very suggestive, very evocative as an area. And this is a very young company for vinification. And so the culture of wine production is very much rooted in the Abruzzo region. And the producer is Emilio. The owner is Emilio Rapino, a young man who has inherited the company. This is the third generation. This is a third generation family business. And actually, he told me that his predecessors were not selling the wine, but they were giving it for free to friends. And then, of course, he changed this, and he gave the company a very personal imprint. And so, to give you an idea, so this is one of the young people who who has come back to the region to to grow to grow the vine varieties. And as a matter of fact, this is a phenomenon that we have been experiencing a lot in recent time. Young people who went away from the Abruzzo region, and they're coming now. They're coming back now, and he's one of these young people, and he is. Doing this with great passion. And the Pecorino wine is a recent bet. So 2018, this is the first release. And so so in any case, this wine is 1 year old. So therefore, and I believe that they are releasing the second year right now. And but in any case, with regard to Pecorino, let me say, the interpretation is very special here. And just to give you a few anecdotes in relation to this company. So the Gira line is a new line. And this is derived from the Emilio Rapino's idea to experiment. And he needs to do something with so he thought of growing something different, and he came up with this idea. So let's start with the last wine. And this is a very important wine, both for the bottle it features and also in its characteristics. So here I do not have a technical card for it, but in any case, this is a wine that has been kept in oak, and I would like to know more about this, as a matter of fact. And this wine presents an important essence. So therefore, we have fruit note, which are very important. And then we have a more boisé component that is related to our pineapple and bread crust. It's very flavory, savory wine, very rich at the palate, almost overwhelming. And I like the idea that we have a combination of fruit juice and salt, and then we have an acid content which is evident. Okay, maybe should we introduce it, or should we leave the floor to the president? Oh, yes, because he's been the soul of this project. Giving even more importance to cooperation, because this is a special project by another important company from Abruzzo, Codice Citra, gathering more than 3,000 vine growers. And here And they started from a selection of the best vineyards. And then, of course, they are followed starting from the agronomic part. And of course, this is also a project, and I will leave the floor to the president right away. This is a very important project, as I was saying earlier on. So, good morning, everybody. So, sorry I came in late, but I was involved in a different meeting. So, thank you for coming, and I hope you had a chance to really come to know wine, which is very interesting to us. The Abruzzo region is still a region that needs to be promoted, and the Pecorino wine even more. Pecorino wine is a local wine that has been rediscovered recently because our vine growers and wine producers have been so good at preserving biodiversity. The biodiversity that is very typical of the Abruzzo region. And we wanted to present to you this territory, which is so much interesting. I believe that Davide has introduced our region as a small region, but with so many identities, the hills, the mountains, the seaside, and the countryside, and also with additional dedicated with the different areas also dedicated to vine growing. And what else? Well, with our territory, as Davide said, we have many cooperatives, and I have as a family, we do have a cooperative. And as a matter of fact, we have concentrated efforts in making our wines known. And in the past 10 years, we have established different initiatives to increase the value and the knowledge about our wines. In 2016, we did something interesting, meaning that we've been involving together with Riccardo Cottarella and Attilio Scienza. And we developed a denomination in order to understand which could be the different territories which could be most suitable for every type of product. And the Pecorino Tegeo wine, this is the year 2018. And the first vinification was completed thanks to the producers in the first place. And then together with them, with Attilio Censo, we also followed the following steps. And this wine was released 1 year ago. And we made the decision to wait, as a matter of fact. We left the wine age longer. And therefore, so this is the result that we have obtained. I hope that you liked it. I hope that you could appreciate it. Discovering a wine that we are proud of, and we will do our best to promote it even further and also beyond our region, so that also the people who are not coming to the Abruzzo region can come and know it. And yes, in fact, this territory is very important, very beautiful, And all these wines are very eloquent samples with a very strong expression, very well defined expression, I would say. So thank you, thank you. Okay, so going back to Mario Soldati, frankness, cordiality, in witty mood, and active dynamism. I believe this is exactly what we've been experiencing so far. Yes, an additional thing I would like to share with you is the fact that in Abruzzo, in the Abruzzo region, the most typical vine growing technique is the tendone and pergola, and this is exactly the same for Trebbiano and Montepulciano. However, even if in the 90s and in the year 2000, a different type of vine growing was privileged, like the Spalier method. Now this one protects the grapes more from the sun, and also for the pecorino wine, which is grown, which is harvested earlier. Well, you know, this is important, and in fact, the last wine you tasted, you know, here. We have the pergola, and but also for the other one. So this is an additional characterization that the Abruzzo wine producers want to highlight, and this is still very much representative of this. Yeah. Are there questions? We're here. Yes? Unfortunately, the interpreter cannot translate the question because there is no microphone being used. So a few thousands was the answer. So production is still very small and limited, so therefore export meets domestic demand. However, we are exporting it to Northern Europe and in North America. I would like to ask, to what extent and why Pecorino has been concealed by Trebbiano, and when was it made the decision to make it stand out in a certain way, giving it autonomous life? Well, let me say Pecorino, the Pecorino vine variety was abandoned in the 50s and then recovered end of the 90s, beginning of the 2000s. And they had been abandoned because after the war, you know, producers in general, growers in general preferred higher yield varieties. And also in the Abruzzo region, vine growers preferred Trebbiano. And for this reason, this vine variety was abandoned. But thanks to the fact that a few kept a few samples. They rediscovered it, recovered it, and in the 90s, a few vine growers planted it again. And as she was saying, in 1996, we had the first bottle of Pecorino wine. And then maybe we can also say the Abruzzo vine growers. Well, they had been working with the Trebbiano for so many years, you know, they paid attention only to it. And then also the market response was immediate and growing for the Pecorino wine. And therefore, companies started investing again. And from the low number of hectares dedicated to it. Now we have more than 2,500 hectares. So therefore now it is also extending beyond the Abruzzo region, as we said, to the south of the Marche region. And so therefore there is a larger, greater distribution of the product. I believe that the same holds true for Passerina wine, and very much similarly to Pecorino wine. So Passerina had the same story. But let me say that the results in terms of product and attention from the market were higher on Pecorino as compared to Passerina. So therefore, producers concentrated on this vine variety, the Pecorino vine variety. And in addition to this, well, you know, other local vine varieties were rediscovered. Toccio Montonico, for example, especially for the ductility of these vine varieties, you know, because naturally they are very suitable for spumante production. And I believe that this will be the next step. So maybe next year. Next year we will present the Pecorino Bollicine. And this is an additional step in this process. Because, as I said, Pecorino, the Pecorino vine variety is very versatile, suitable for various types of vinification. And this is definitely a plus for producers because they can think of producing more lines and giving different interpretations. I don't know. So the idea of the title, the white wine of the future. So we should be all convinced that this is one of the national white wine variety, which is very challenging and promising. So the idea was to provide you with an overview. And there is a possibility that this wine can also collect challenges in terms of aging. And so my invitation is to grow the historic side of these wineries and understand, you know, what's coming next. It's not easy, though. Yes, in fact. So the number of bottles is still low. So wine tasting and tourism. What about this? Well, wine tasting and tourism. Well, this is a sector And in fact, the consortium has paid much attention to it lately. As you can imagine, the Abruzzo region is not one of the most important tourist destinations. But as a consortium, we are working in order to make all wineries team up. We are promoting the region more effectively, and we have also developed an app in 2019. Unfortunately, after that, we have had the pandemic. But this app is called Percorsi. And through the app, you can have access to all the services the wineries offer, with an explanation of all the characteristics of the region, with the specific tours. The application, as a matter of fact, offers 12 tours, and each tour features a number of wineries, and the wineries present their services, so wine tasting, visits, staying, picnicking, harvesting, and so on and so forth. So different services are being offered, and this is a sector which needs to be promoted even further as a consortium, and also on the side of the wineries. And as a matter of fact, everybody has understood that this is a very important component to maintain these entities, to support these entities, as a matter of fact. And this is a small region, and in just a few kilometers, it really features different landscapes, the hills, the mountains, the sea, small villages, and also it can also offer a special cuisine, and gastronomy is also very strong, and it's been growing in the latest years. And one of our chefs is participating at the expo. Okay. It's pouring with rain outside. With regard to the future of Pecorino wine, I would like to ask a question to the president. So the future of this vine variety, and the future of all these interpretations. So the producers have already given their imprinting, clear imprinting, and we as a consortium, together with all the producers, we have a challenge ahead of us, represented by our territory in the offering of gastronomy and wines. So the approach of the territory should comprise all the different souls that our territory contains. As you said, we have the hills, the mountains, the sea, the countryside, the valleys, and the characteristics of our wines are different. not only because of the different approach of the producers, but also because the soil is different, the climate is different, and we wanted to represent it also in a different way according to the different labels. So the future of the Pecorino wine is to make the different characteristics of our territory stand out so that consumers can appreciate it. With an approach that is not at all similar to the one used in the rest of the Italy. We will talk about this in a few months, but I cannot tell you more because we needed to complete the procedure with the ministry. Well, we have a suspense here. Nice. So. So thank you. I would like to thank all the participants. I would like to thank specifically Leila, who described the wines, and be waiting for you in Abruzzo and drink Abruzzo wines. Thank you.